Greetings of peace. Today I'm going to talk about son husbandry and the negative effects it has on society. So, what is a son husband? Pretty much, a son husband is a surrogate husband. Pretty much, it's when a mother turns her son into a surrogate husband. Why does this happen? Pretty much, it happens when this woman mismanages her youth, I can't say that. Sometimes unexpected things happen. Sometimes you get with somebody, it doesn't work out for reasons outside of your control. But oftentimes, based on what I've seen, based on my upbringing, it's because the woman mismanaged her youth. But what happens with the son husband? Pretty much, the woman uses her son as a surrogate husband. He becomes a source of security to her in the absence of a proper husband. So pretty much, she coddles this young man and develops a relationship of codependency with him. And in this codependency, he fails to develop the skills and the tools he needs for manhood. Usually his growth is stunted, and you could say he exists in a state of suspended adolescence. Usually this is a symptom of sons born to mothers of a lower socioeconomic background. Oftentimes, these women have had traumatic upbringings and they have certain issues, et cetera, which lead them to form this unhealthy relationship with their son. The negative aspects come as a result of this situation, right? The young man, he never gains the tools he needs for manhood. And let's say he's in a lower socioeconomic background, he'll take his cues from the mainstream culture of that demographic, which is usually hip hop culture. Hip hop culture glorifies gangsterdom, drug dealing, and murder. Now, where does hip hop get its cues from? The hip hop culture has its inception in the 1980s out of the crack cocaine era. So pretty much the people, the popular rappers of the day, they're trying to emulate drug dealers from the 1980s. Now, the drug dealers of the 1980s, most of those famous guys, or most of those guys who are making that kind of money, were in between the ages of 12 to 21. So most of them were not of the age of mature reason. Most of them were adolescents doing the things they did, which into selling drugs, killing, robbing, stealing, gang banging, et cetera. So you have these broken, codependent young men taking their cues from hip hop, and hip hop's taking their cues from 1980s drug dealers who were adolescents, who were pretty much out of control. And these adolescents also came up in single mother homes, and oftentimes they were son husband. How did this phenomenon of son husbandry come about? It really started in the 70s. Pretty much the government offered incentives to low income families, kickbacks if there wasn't a man in the home. So, if there wasn't a man in the home, the woman had kickbacks and had financial incentives to not have a man in the home. And that combined with poverty, and then the fact that the drugs that were in these communities pretty much were flown in by the government. So there's two sides of the government. There's the mainstream side that you see, and there's the shadow side. So the government has its cut. Every government in every country on this face on this earth have their cut in crime. In the society, crime will never cease to exist in this current modern era because the governments of the world profit off of it, and oftentimes they are the kingpins of it silently, and they have a few fall guys and a few faces that that take the blame. But oftentimes none of this stuff can happen without the government's acquiescence. This is a business. There's the dirty side, and then there's the clean side, and that's just how it is. So. Pretty much, what these young men lack inside their lives and in their psyche and in their development, that causes them to turn to drugs, gang banging, et cetera, is that how can I say this? Well, number one, they have no emotional intelligence. Because they have no emotional intelligence. They have no vocational skills. How can I put it this way? Well, women and men deal with life in different ways. Women are emotional It's okay for women to emote and go through life a certain way. And because women are beholden to their emotions, oftentimes they live in the moment and they do things in the short term because there's no real true consequence for their actions, except for maybe getting their feelings hurt. If you're dealing with a woman and she's fairly attractive, there's always somebody to rescue her from her bad mistakes, whether that's the government or a man who's sexually enamored with her, etc., that she could take advantage of. As young men, you don't have that luxury. So you have young men who are going off their emotional impulses because they're taking the cues from the women in their family because that's who they're brought up by. So that's low impulse control, which is causing them to do certain things. And then because a lot of them, do not have their psyche's not developed, so they're susceptible to the media and the how can I say in the mass marketing of these corporations. So they take their cues from hip hop, etc., and mainstream culture, which is glorifying gangsterdom, which is really a facade. So you have low impulse control, you have the media, and these are young impressionable men. You have a few that are more intelligent than the rest and will slip through the cracks. But you have poverty, you have the mainstream media, and then you have low emotional IQ. And that leads to these, often leads to criminality. Now why aren't the fathers in the home? A lot of women will blame the men and say that they not want to be there and that the men are no good, etc., etc. But oftentimes these women chose these men to procreate with, and these men had a history of being a certain way before these women laid down. They had a history of, criminality, a history of not being responsible, a history of being a bum, a history of being a drug dealer, a history of being on drugs, etc., etc. Oftentimes these women laid down with these men due to pure lust and thought maybe they could change them, or maybe they didn't want to change them. Many of these women were acting out of their emotions and their lust, and then they don't want to take accountability for the situation that they found themselves in. There are plenty of eligible men who are hardworking, who are intelligent, who are not bottom feeders, but oftentimes because of their stability and because they're rational and because they're structured, it's not exciting to the woman because it's not emotionally stimulating to her. And nothing's worse for a woman than being bored. You know what I'm saying? So that's how it is. So this is becoming more of a trend as we're becoming more modern. Women do not need men for the financial provisioning, so they believe they can do it all their own. But inadvertently, they're creating a not so good social situation with what they're pushing out into the world in terms of these young men. And I can speak of it because I come from these backgrounds, and so do my peers. So I've seen these things firsthand, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, what these young men need, they need a vocation where they can earn a living without having to turn to drugs. But the thing is this, what I'm coming to find is that even if you have something to offer to these young men and you have a track record of making X amount of dollars and you're willing to teach and coach them, oftentimes they're not interested because it's not sexy enough. And that goes back to the mainstream culture. They've been indoctrinated with foolishness in their mind, and they want a fair image. And usually this image is to impress the young women of their demographic who are equally as stupid. But that's just how it is. You know what I'm saying? These people, this whole situation, it's all, they're all pawns in a bigger game. If you want to know who's behind it, you have to go research who owns these music companies, also who owns and controls these prisons, who owns and controls the drugs that's coming into the community, et cetera, et cetera. Based on where we're at right now in the United States with this whole with our whole social situation, on a macro scale, there's probably no turning back. It's probably going to get worse and worse, and it's going to implode. There's going to be a few individuals who come from these environments who are going to make the right decisions for themselves and rise to the occasion and make something of themselves. But as a whole, it's pretty much over with. What else can I say about this topic? Well, I was speaking about women mismanaging their youth. I'll make another video about that later, but that's all I have to say about this. But yes, if you if you are a woman watching this and you know you're a single mother and you have a son underneath you, it would be good for you to put him in some type of vocational program. I would put him in boxing. I'd put him in somewhere he could get some discipline, some physical discipline, and get him some serious life skills that will serve him for the future. If you're a young man watching this, I suggest you do the same. Ultimately, as a young man, nobody really cares about you in this society. You're gonna have to make your own way. Anything you do comes with severe consequences, and you're gonna have to bear the brunt of every action and decision you make. You have no fallback plan, so you have to make sure that you can reach the age of reason and do well for yourself. And if you have any questions or thoughts, you can leave a comment. Thank you.